The first question is, it says, my question is in relation to the screen of consciousness on which the world is projected, on which this world is projected. Could you talk about how our destiny is projected on the screen in the light of Bhagavan's teachings? Is everything that I'm currently seeing right now, including my body, a projection on the screen, just like how a cinema is projected on a screen? Thank you.
Yes, yes, everything is a projection on the screen of consciousness. Consciousness or awareness in its pure form is what we actually are. However, all this appears not in the view of ourselves as we actually are, but only in the view of ourselves as ego. Ego is the same consciousness mixed and conflated with adjuncts. So ego is sometimes referred to as Chittabhasa. Chittabhasa means abhasa means likeness or a semblance. It can also mean a reflection, because when you see your reflection in a mirror, you're not seeing yourself, you're seeing a likeness of yourself. So it's in that sense, but Chittabhasa means a reflection. But the basic meaning of Chittabhasa, it's a likeness or a semblance of awareness. So ego is not the real awareness, because real awareness is just a pure awareness in the view of which nothing other than itself exists. So pure awareness is never aware of anything other than itself. That's why it's called pure awareness. Ego is the adjunct mixed awareness, the impure awareness. So it's only, as Bhagavan says, if oneself is in that fourth verse of Ulladu which I was referring to earlier, he says, if oneself is a form, the world and God will be likewise. If oneself is not a form, who can see their forms and how? So all phenomena appear only in the view of ego. So the screen on which the screen on which all phenomena appear is ego, this Chittabhasa, this reflection of awareness, this likeness of awareness, not where does this ego appear? Only in the real awareness, but not in the view of real awareness. It's only in the view of ego. So the immediate screen on which everything appears is ego. The ultimate screen is the pure awareness. So we need to clearly make that distinction. But at the same time, though we make the distinction, we shouldn't think these are two different awarenesses, two different eyes. As Bhagavan often emphasizes, we are one. When we remain as we actually are, that is pure awareness. When we rise as ego, it is, we seem to be something other than what we actually are. So we can understand this with the analogy of the snake and the rope. The snake and the rope are not two different things. There's only one thing that's lying there on the path. What it actually is a rope. What it seems to be is a snake. So the difference between the snake and the rope is not a difference in substance. It's only a difference in appearance. Likewise, the difference between ego and our real nature is not a difference in substance. It's not that there are two different eyes. There's only one eye. The difference is a difference in appearance. And what we actually are is just pure awareness. When we rise as ego, we seem to be ego. Ego is not what we actually are. So it's only in the view of ego that all phenomena appear. So that's why I say the immediate screen on which everything appears is the reflected awareness called ego. Because it's only in the view of ego that all these things seem to exist. However, ego couldn't seem to exist if it wasn't for the real existence of ourself. So what actually exists, what really exists, is only Sat-Chit, that fundamental awareness of our own existence, I am. That is the being awareness, Sat-Chit. When we rise as ego, we borrow our substance from Sat-Chit, and we borrow our form from the body. That's why Bhagavan, in verse 25 of Valunaptu, he describes ego as a formless phantom. It's formless because though it always experiences itself as I am this form of 5 sheaths called body, it has no form of its own. And though it always is aware of itself as I am, that is not its own awareness. It has borrowed that awareness I am from the real awareness I am, Sat-Chit. So ego is neither the body, nor is it Sat-Chit. It is, as Bhagavan says, it's a spurious entity that rises between the two. Bhagavan used to illustrate this with the story of the Maparetorum, bridegroom's friend. That is a wayfarer saw a marriage was just about to commence. The bride's party had, the bridegroom's party had just arrived from their village, and they were being received by the bride's party. So he thought, oh, marriage, that means in those days marriages lasted 5 days, and there was sumptuous feasting and everything. So he thought, this is very nice for 5 days. If I'm clever, I can have 3 meals for 5 days. So he came, and as if he was a very important person, he went to the bride's party and said, started making demands. You should, the bridegroom expects this, the bridegroom expects that, or the bridegroom's party expects this, expects that. So they were thinking he belonged to the bridegroom's party. And the bridegroom, seeing this very helpful person who kept on running messages between them and the bride's party, they thought he belongs to the bride's party. So both parties thought he belonged to the other party, whereas actually he didn't belong to either. And for 5 days, he was doing very well. And towards the end, people started to leave, and only the very close family members remained. And then they started asking about who is this person, who is that person, and how is this person related to you, how that person related to you. Then naturally, one party or other asked, who was that very helpful young man? And they said, no, he belonged to your party, didn't he? No, he didn't belong to our party. Did he belong to your party? No. Then who is he? As soon as they started to inquire about who he was, he took flight, he ran away. Likewise, this ego is just an imposter. It is posing as I am, and it's also posing as the body. It is neither. So why I say this is, it's the awareness in which all phenomena appear is only ego. It's only in the view of ego, but all this world exists. In the view of pure awareness, Brahman, or Atma-swarupa, our own real nature, what is alone is what is. That is only I am. Nothing other than I am exists. So strictly speaking, the screen on which everything appears is the screen of ego. But what ego, if you investigate ego, it's nothing other than pure awareness, because the substance of ego is only that fundamental awareness I am. When we investigate ourselves, though ego is this adjunct mixed awareness, I am this body, when we investigate ourselves, what are we investigating? We're not investigating the adjuncts. We're not investigating the body. We're not investigating the person we seem to be. The body means here all 5 sheaths. We're not investigating the physical form of the body. That's the doctors do that. We're not investigating the prana. That's also the domain of doctors. The physiological functions in the body. That's also a domain of doctors. We're not investigating the mind. Leave that to psychologists and others. We're not investigating the intellect. We're not investigating the will. We're investigating who am I? Who is that I who has risen to say, all these 5 are mine? I am all these 5 sheaths. That is what we're investigating. So it's only as Bhagavan said, it's the essential chit aspect of ego, but we're investigating. That essential chit aspect of ego is nothing other than Sat Chit. It's nothing other than that pure awareness that we actually are. But what ego essentially is only Sat Chit. That is, the substance that appears as ego is only Sat Chit. So what we actually are is only Sat Chit. Now we seem to be ego. So when we investigate ourselves, we are trying to see what we actually are. So we're not attending to any of the adjuncts. We're attending only to the fundamental awareness I am. That is our substance. That is what we're investigating our own existence, our own awareness, our own being is what we are investigating. So the screen on which everything appears is this adjunct mixed awareness, I am this body. So the screen in which everything appears is ego. If we investigate ego, we will find it is nothing but pure awareness. So the ultimate screen is pure awareness. The immediate screen on which everything appears is ego. I'm not saying that there are two awarenesses. There is only one awareness. But that one awareness, when it's mixed with adjuncts, that is what is called ego. And it's only in the view of ego that everything appears. So on this screen of awareness, the screen of ego, so many phenomena appear. That all the events of our life are going on like a cinema, like a film in a cinema. According to Bhagavan, all that we are to experience is determined by prarabdha. Prarabdha means it is the fruit of actions that we've done in past lives. So whatever pleasures or pains we experience, they're the fruit of our past actions, not the actions we've done in this lifetime, though it may sometimes seem, but because I worked hard, I earned a lot of money, so now I'm very comfortably off. We think it's because of the work we've done now. It's actually because that is what was destined for us. And what is destined for us is what is not the fruit of actions we've done in this lifetime, but the fruit of actions we've done in previous lifetimes. But as I say, it's not a random selection of fruit. It is selected by God, or Bhagavan, let's say, selected by Bhagavan. He selects those fruit that will be most conducive to our spiritual development. So the prarabdha is tailor-made to suit our present level of spiritual development. So what we are to undergo, that is determined entirely by Bhagavan. It is the fruit of our actions, but as soon as we do any action, the result of that action is then out of our hands. If you shoot an arrow from a bow, before you shoot it, you can point it in this direction or that direction. Once you've shot it, you can't change the direction. So as soon as the arrow is released from the bow, the archer no longer has any control over it. Likewise, when we do an action, as soon as we do an action, it produces a fruit, but the fruit is out of our hands. The fruit is entirely in the hands of God. So it is God who determines for each action what is the appropriate fruit and when is the appropriate time for us to experience that fruit. So in each lifetime, we are doing so many actions under the sway of our vasanas. Those actions that we do under the sway of our vasanas are called agamya. Agamya, because they're actions done by our will, that in accordance with our will. Vasanas means our will, what we like or dislike. So whatever we do under the sway of our vasanas are called agamya, and agamya bear fruit. The fruit of agamya done in each life gets stored in what is called sanchita. Sanchita simply means a heap or a pile. So that is the storehouse of all the fruit of past actions, but we haven't yet experienced. And as a general rule, in each lifetime, we can experience only one lifetime's worth of experiences. If we are destined to live for 60 years or 70 years or 80 years, we can only experience that amount. That is 80 years worth of experience we can experience in this life if we're destined to live for 80 years. But our desires are often far, far stronger. I mean, we want to experience much more than we're able to experience. So we are doing so many karmas under the sway of our karmas, means actions by mind, speech, and body, under the sway of our vasanas. Those actions do not bear fruit in this lifetime. Though they may sometimes seem to bear fruit, they don't actually. The fruit of those actions gets stored in sanchita. And because we do more agamya every life, that is, the quantity of fruit we accumulate each life is, as a general rule, it's much more than the quantity of fruit that we experience. The sanchita is an ever-growing pile. Once we experience the fruit of action, that fruit is then finished. This is why in the first verse of Ulinaptu, Bhagavan says, first verse of Upadeshundya, Bhagavan says, karma giving fruit is by the ordainment of God. That means it's entirely in God's hands, what fruit each action is to give, and when, where, and how it is to be experienced. And then in the second verse, he says, the fruit of action passes away. Why he says it passes away? When we experience any action, when we experience any fruit of an action, once you've experienced that fruit is finished. You can't experience the same fruit more than once. So if you're given an apple, you can only eat the apple once. You can't eat the apple today and again eat the apple tomorrow. But once it's eaten, it's finished. Likewise with the fruit of karma. Once we experience the fruit of a karma, it's finished. But so the Palamasaswatam, as he says in the Sanskrit version, the fruit is transient. It doesn't last. Once you experience the fruit, it's finished. What does last is the seeds that give rise to those actions. That's why he says in verse 2 of Upadeshundya, Vinayam vilevu vilevutru, the fruit of action passing away. So that means the fruit of action passes away. Then he says, Vittai vinay kadal vitiram. As seed causes to fall in the ocean of action. So what causes us to fall in the ocean of action is the seeds. What are those seeds? Those seeds are the vasanas. Under the sway of our vasanas, we do actions by mind, speech, and body. That is, whenever we allow our attention to move away from ourselves, that is the beginning of a mental activity. All mental activity begins with the movement of our attention away from ourselves towards something else. So our attention moves away from ourselves under the sway of our vasanas, under the sway of our Vishaya vasanas. So the Vishaya vasanas are the seeds that prompt us to act and thereby make us fall in the ocean of action. So the fruit of action are not a problem. The fruit of action are in God's hand. He will give us when, where, and where it's appropriate. So we don't have to worry about the fruit of our action. What we need to be concerned about is the seeds that give rise to action. The seeds, as I say, are vasanas. Vasanas are inclinations. We are not bound by our inclinations. We may be inclined to do something, but it's up to us whether we do as we're inclined to do. I may be inclined to, if I'm very poor, I may be inclined to rob the bank in order to have money. Just because I have that inclination to rob the bank doesn't mean my inclinations cannot force me to rob the bank. If I go and rob the bank, it's because I've allowed myself to be swayed by that inclination. If I decide, no, robbing the bank isn't good, even though I'm poor, let me bear with this. If we decide like that, we are not allowing ourselves to be swayed by that, so we don't act accordingly. So whatever actions we do, whatever agamya we do, it's when we allow ourselves to be swayed by our vasanas. because we allow ourselves to be swayed by our vasanas, we are responsible for the consequences. That is why the actions we do under the sway of our vasanas bear fruit. That is why Bhagavan says in verse 2, but that it's the seeds, the seeds means the vasanas, but it causes us to fall in the ocean of action. So it's the seeds we need to be concerned about, not the fruit. The fruit, let Bhagavan take care of that. He will give us whatever fruit is appropriate for us to experience now. So whatever fruit we experience now, in other words, whatever prarabdha we undergo, is his will. Though it is the fruit of our past action, the fruit of our past actions, those fruit that he has selected as being the fruit that will be most beneficial, most conducive to our spiritual progress. So Bhagavan often used to say, whether you call it prarabdha or God's will, it's the same thing. However, so whatever we are to experience in this lifetime is already predetermined. So the picture on the screen is predetermined. And in order for us to experience whatever we're destined to experience, some actions on our part are necessary. Supposing it's our destiny to become a doctor. In order to become a doctor, we have to study, we have to pass exams, and we have to work as a doctor. We have to do all those. So because that is our destiny, we will be made to do those actions. So that's what Bhagavan says in the first sentence of a note that he wrote for his mother. According to the destiny of each one, he who is for that, being there, meaning being in the heart of each one of them, will make them act. So whatever actions we need to do in order to experience our prarabdha, whatever actions of mind, speech, and body we need to do, we will be made to do. However, this does not mean that all the actions we do are under our actions we're made to do, because we also do act under the sway of our vasanas. Even if an action is an action we're made to do, supposing it's our destiny to be a doctor, and so we will be made to study and to pass the exam and everything, and to work as a doctor. But most people in fact, almost all people who become doctors, they also want to become doctors. Their motives may be different. Some people may want to become doctor because it's a very prestigious job to have. Some people may want to become a doctor because they think they can earn a lot of money by being a doctor. Some people may want to become a doctor because they got that spirit of service. They really want to help others. And they see people suffering from so many illnesses. They want to alleviate that suffering. So there can be different motives, but almost invariably, those people who study hard and become doctors, they do so because they want to become doctors. So though the action is an action they're made to do in accordance with their destiny, it's also an action they're being made to do by their vasanas. So just because an action is an action we are made to do doesn't necessarily exonerate us. If we are also doing it under the sway of our vasanas, it's agamya. Even though we are being, in such cases, the same action is being driven both by our will and by God's will. But not all actions are like this. Some actions we do purely according to our own will. Some actions we do, it's purely against, very seldom is actually purely according to God's will, because our will is constantly interfering. So even if supposing it's supposing we drive a car and it's our destiny to have an accident, we will be made to drive in a careless manner and thereby bring about the accident. But most people who drive in a careless manner, they do it because they're in a hurry to get somewhere. So almost invariably, even though God is making us act, we are also being driven by our vasanas. So we shouldn't think that just because God makes us do those actions that are necessary for us to do, but all actions are done by God. I've got actions that we're made to do by God. if all the actions we did were actions we were made to do by God, we wouldn't experience the fruit. God would have to experience the fruit. We experience the fruit because we have done, it's we who have done the action and of our own volition. So whatever is to be experienced is according to destiny. That doesn't mean all the actions we do are according to destiny. So how our will and God's will are working side by side, and sometimes opposing each other, sometimes going the same direction. That it's too complicated for us to discern clearly what is God's will and what is our will. But what we do know is, so long as we allow ourselves to be swayed by our vasanas, we will inevitably do actions, at least by mind. And actions of mind lead to actions of speech and lead to actions of body. So most of the actions we do under the sway of our vasanas. So the cinema analogy is useful up to a certain point. But in the case of a cinema, we have what is projected on the screen. We are not involved in that at all. We are just a spectator. We may identify ourselves with the hero or the heroine of the movie, and but we actually are not acting. We're not doing that. We have no say in what's going on. In the case of this projection of prarabdha, what we are destined to experience, that is fixed, that we've got no say over. But we do have freedom to act within that prarabdha. So it's all analogies have their limitations. So, but what we can say is whatever happens to us, not what happens by us, but what happens to us is all according to destiny. So to that extent, yes, everything that is projected on the screen is according to destiny. But that doesn't mean that everything that doesn't mean all the actions we are doing according to our vasanas are according to destiny. But vasanas are the cause of us doing the action, the fruit of which is destiny. So some people say, oh, it's my destiny to have strong vasanas. No, it is not your destiny. But vasanas are strong because we allow ourselves to be swayed by them. So it's entirely up to us whether we allow ourselves to be swayed by our vasanas or not. We are always free to avoid being swayed by our vasanas. How to avoid being swayed by our vasanas? To the extent to which we cling to self-attentiveness, we thereby do not allow ourselves to be swayed by our vasanas, and so the vasanas are weakened, and our love to attend to ourselves is strengthened. So we always have freedom. We just don't have freedom to experience what we want to experience and avoid experiencing what we don't want to experience, because that is all determined by destiny. But we do have freedom either to be swayed by our vasanas or not to be swayed by them, or to be swayed by this vasana or that vasana, because so many times our Vishaya vasanas are pulling us in so many different directions. Obviously, often we have an inclination to do one thing and also an inclination not to do that, or to do the opposite. So we are the ones who decide whether we are swayed by this inclination or that inclination, or by no inclination, no Vishaya vasana at all, only by our love to attend to ourselves. So I hope that adequately answers that.
I think it does, but just something to clarify on this, because it can be a bit confusing. The inclinations we have and the circumstances which befall us, that sort of would owe to our past actions, and one can say that's God's will, and so on. But the problem becomes if we say that our actions themselves are in some way God's will, unless we or that even a component of them is God's will, unless we kind of specify what that is, because otherwise there is this problem that that somebody is killing someone and say it's God's will. So I mean, just to clarify that and differentiate it, I mean, there is the inclination. There are the circumstances which are there for us in which these inclinations arise. but the movement from inclinations to circumstances must be the scope of our free will, so to speak, in which we are creating future karma. That I just want to clarify, so that because God's will becomes it's always a problem with words.
Yes. But that is, we don't have to worry about the actions that we are made to do by God, because we are going to be made to do those actions anyway. We cannot avoid doing those actions, but we are made to do by God in accordance with our prarabdha. And we cannot distinguish which actions, or to what extent any particular action is in accordance with God's will, or to what extent it's purely in accordance with our will. We cannot distinguish. So the actions that we are to do in accordance with our destiny will be made to do. But the vast majority of actions we're doing under the sway of our vasanas. Since we cannot distinguish to what extent any action we're being made to do it by God, or to what extent it's purely by our will, all we can do is to avoid being swayed by our vasanas. To the extent to which we allow ourselves to be swayed by our vasanas, we are inevitably doing agamya. And whatever agamya we do, we are responsible for that. So we can, in order to surrender our will to God's will, we need to not act according to our will. In other words, not allow ourselves to be swayed by our vasanas. We have that freedom. It's up to us. That if vasanas are inclinations, it's up to us whether we allow ourselves to be swayed by an inclination or don't allow ourselves to be swayed by it. So, but vasanas have no power of their own. Vasanas derive their power only from us, because there are inclinations. So the vasanas that seem to be strong, vasanas seem to be strengthened to the extent to which we allow ourselves to be swayed by them. So the more we allow ourselves to be swayed by a particular vasana, the stronger it becomes. But we can weaken any vasana by not allowing ourselves to be swayed by it. Because when we don't allow ourselves to be swayed by it, we are not giving it power. And vasanas have no power whatsoever of their own. We say, oh, but vasanas have so much power over me. It's because of my vasanas that I'm doing this or I'm doing that, or my mind is wandering here and there because of vasanas. We put the blame on vasanas, but it's we who allow ourselves to be swayed by those vasanas. So where our moral responsibility lies is in not allowing ourselves to be swayed by our vasanas. If we cling firmly to self-attentiveness, we are thereby not allowing ourselves to be swayed by our Vishaya vasanas. And if we were clinging to self-attentiveness so firmly that we didn't allow our attention to go away towards anything else, then whatever actions are done by mind, speech, and body will be actions that we're made to do by God. But so long as we are allowing our attention to go away from ourselves, we are responsible for our actions.
Thank you, Michael, for that clarification. Yeah. And I'm going to take a little bit more advantage for just one a small point, because there are a lot of questions, but it's sort of, it came up in what you were saying, and I thought it was quite important. So when we talk about ego or mind or jiva as grasping, we're basically talking about attention, because in the sense that the attention is moving outwards, and that is the grasping. Whereas when we're not grasping, then the attention is, as you say, self-attention. Yeah. And it just sort of struck me that and you were also saying that I think you said something to the effect that perceiving as an acting, perceiving is to do with the mind or ego and so on. And that is the attending, because perceiving and attending are not separable. Yes. And so that is, in a way, through the attention, in a sense, that the world comes into being, and the notion of self and other comes into being, and through the attention that it subsides. Exactly. They're almost synonymous. And it just struck me that, there is this a term in Buddhism for which this translates as attention called manasikara, or whatever it may mean there, but it's almost as if as attention itself is kind of is mind creating, world creating in that sense.
Exactly. That is what Bhagavan said. It's all a matter of attention. It's because we have allowed our attention to go away from ourselves, but we've created this entire universe. This is why attention is sometimes described as chit shakti, the power of awareness. That is, it's because when we allow our attention to go outwards, we project, we create all of this. If we don't allow our attention to go inwards, if instead of grasping, as you say, grasping, attention is itself grasping, attention is itself attachment. So the very nature of ego is grasping. As Bhagavan says, grasping form, it comes into existence. Grasping form, it stands. Grasping and feeding form, it flourishes abundantly. Leaving form, it grasps form. So grasping is the very nature of ego. So as ego, we cannot remain without grasping. But what Bhagavan says is, stop grasping other things. Grasp yourself. As you say, grasp means attend. So instead of attending to anything else, we need to attend to ourselves.
That is incredibly helpful. I'm sure, I think everybody feel that. And this idea that attention is chit shakti, which means basically the power of awareness, the power of mind, which is the ego. So then with the attention, if we think of attention as something so much broader, I mean, as this incredible sort of power, which is called Maya, or it can be called whatever it is, then one can understand how this entire world kind of comes into being, and why, through the sort of attention we have, we can create so many different worlds, misery, happiness, and all the rest of it. It's just kind of, and that is the sort of this idea of the I thought, the primordial word kind of thing, whatever they call, all these paravaka, I mean, all these various vakas that's fine. I'll just.
So whatever we attend to a lot, that thing looms large in our life. So for different people, different things are important. Some people are very interested in sports. Their main passion in life is football, for example. They want their team to win. So every day of the week, they're reading a newspaper, reading the latest news, following it, watching the matches. For them, most important thing in life is their team winning the football, because they attend to it so much. Other people, philosophy may be the most interesting thing. Other people, their family may be the most interesting thing. Other people, their money may be the most interesting thing. Most of us, we scattered our interest over so many things, but whatever, to the extent to which we attend to anything, that thing looms large in our life. So the more we allow our mind to dwell on the thing, the bigger that thing becomes. This is how people sometimes succumb to obsessive thoughts or phobias or so on, because they allow their mind to dwell so much on that, but that becomes something very big in their life. So if we want to make knowing ourselves the big thing in our life, we need to attend to ourselves more and more. The more we attend to ourselves, the more important it will become to us to know who am I. So everything is down to attention. Bhagavan often used to say, it's all a matter of attention. By attention, you've created all this. By directing your attention outward, you've created all this. Only by directing your attention inwards can you bring all of this to an end, a permanent end.
It's incredibly helpful. Thank you so much, Michael. There's a question. I think there's more than one question from Stuart. You wanted to ask a question?
Hi, just one. Thank you, Shalina. Hi, Michael.
Hi.
Hi. I just want to give you one thing as a statement, which is that as I've been following, attending to myself more, my situation has gotten better. And that's pretty fascinating. Yeah. So it really does work to shift I don't know if the circumstances are shifting.
That is things getting better. That is not because you're attending to yourself. Things are getting better because they're destined to get better. But the difference that attending to yourself makes, if you were attending to yourself, even if things were getting worse, they wouldn't affect you.
Right. And some of them are still, some things are still really, really bad, but are not as affected.
Yeah.
In other words,
that is the efficacy of this.
I have all these problems, but I don't seem to be sucked into them.
Yep.
In the same way.
Yep. That is, what we are destined to experience cannot be changed. We have to experience it. But to the extent to which we turn our attention within, we will be unaffected by it. We'll be unconcerned about it. This is how self-investigation and self-surrender are one and the same thing. That is, the more we attend to ourselves, the more we are withdrawing our attention, our interest from all other things. We're taking more and more interest in knowing who am I. To the extent we're interested in knowing who am I, we'll be unconcerned about whatever may be happening in our external life. So we may be undergoing difficulties. We may be undergoing. At times, life is relatively pleasant. At times, it's relatively unpleasant. These things happen to all of us. We all, according to our destiny, nobody has a 100% pleasant life or 100% unpleasant life. In the midst of all the pains, there are small pleasures. In the midst of all the pleasures, there are pains. So, but we will be less concerned about these things. The more we turn our attention within, the more our interest in, our concern about those things, they lose their strength because we're not allowing our attention to go in that direction. So whatever strength anything has, if you've got a worry or a like or a dislike or something, the more you allow your mind to be swayed by that, the stronger that will become. So it's, as Bhagavan said, it's all a matter of attention. The more we turn our attention within, the less we will be concerned about whatever happens. So let us be in heaven or in hell, it doesn't matter. All we're concerned about is, who am I?
Right. Well, yeah, I'm definitely in hell, but I don't seem to care as much.
Exactly.
I mean, I think hell is getting better because of my prarabdha.
Yeah.
I assume it's a little better. Like, I'm not in a moldy environment that's killing and causing all this stuff, but I still wake up many days and I have medical emergencies all day long, but I don't seem to be going, God, I just don't seem to be as reactive to them.
Right.
So I just wanted to share that as a...
And it's not even the outer, it's the inward reaction.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right, exactly. So I just wanted to verify that this actually does work.
It does. Yeah.
And so... But
this is what Bhagavan describes in the 13th paragraph of putting your luggage aside, not carrying it on your head.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
That is, the prarabdha is the luggage. We can carry that on our head and suffer, or we can put it aside and be happy.
Right. I've still got it partially on my head. But
when we completely leave the luggage aside, we ourselves will be finished.
Okay, so that's the question. So that's my question. My question is that you used a metaphor, and I know it was a metaphor, where you said it's only when we turn ourselves 100% towards the self that while we're conscious, that then it ends the whole story from the ego perspective. But it doesn't end necessarily the momentum of the prarabdha or our... Like, we still experience the prarabdha, we notice the prarabdha, but we're going more and more within, so it becomes less and less real to us and more dreamlike. Until eventually we fully attend only to the self and then it's all just a dream entirely that we're aware of. Is that all right?
That is this. It was Sadhguru who often talked about it in terms of turning 180 degrees. Because now our attention is facing out towards the world.
Right.
We are trying to turn our attention away from the world. That means away from all phenomena, including our own thoughts and feelings and everything, back towards ourselves. So that is, so to speak, turning 180 degrees. During the stage of practice, we are somewhere between 1 degree and 179 degrees, or 179.999 degrees. Until we turn the full 180 degrees, there is still some lingering awareness of something other than ourselves. Only when we turn the full 180 degrees are we aware of nothing other than ourselves. When we're aware of nothing other than ourselves, that is the state of pure awareness. So when we experience ourselves as pure awareness, ego is thereby destroyed, because ego is nothing but the impure awareness, I am this body.
Yes.
So we need to turn 180 degrees for just one split second, and ego is annihilated. Once ego is annihilated, all the 3 karmas are destroyed. This is what Bhagavan says in verse 38 of Uludunapadu. If we are the doer of actions, we will experience the resulting fruit. From that we have to infer, so long as we are still experiencing fruit, so long as we're still experiencing a prarabdha, we're still the doer. So to the extent to which we're experiencing, that shows the extent to which we still have doership. But he says, when one knows oneself by investigating who is the doer of action, in other words, who am I, doership will come to an end, and all the 3 karmas will, doership will cease, and all the 3 karmas will come to an end. Doership is the very nature of ego, because when we rise as ego, we experience the mind, speech, and body as ourself. So whatever actions are done by the mind, speech, or body are done by me. I am sitting, I am talking, I am thinking, and so on. So the doership, we cannot avoid doership so long as we rise as ego. And so long as we rise as ego, we have both doership and experiencership. But the more we turn our attention within, the less we will be concerned about either what we are doing or about that is, the less we'll be concerned about doing anything to achieve anything, and the less we'll be concerned about whatever we are destined to experience. So we are detaching ourselves.
Okay.
But the karmas don't come to an end completely.
Right.
Until ego is destroyed.
Okay. Well, let's say ego is destroyed. So in the case of Bhagavan, because he's the most supreme example that we know. So he would say to people, you experience yourself as separate. I don't experience myself as a guru. I don't experience myself as anything other than Satchit. Yeah, right. So, and yet he appeared to interact with the world. Is that only a creation of the devotee's mind?
Yes. Bhagavan said, the body, speech, and mind of the jnani exists only in the view of the jnani, not of the ajnani. So it's only in our view that Bhagavan seems to be a body and mind. He seems to be a person for us. But in his view, he's aware of himself only as I am, as that infinite, beginningless, endless, limitless, unbroken Satchidananda.
Right. So if we experience anything other than ourselves, we're in the mind ego.
Yes. Well, we are the ego. We are the ego.
Yeah, we are. Right. We are the ego. And then when we turn 180, fully attend only to ourselves, we know the only person who is, when Lakshmi Swami or Bhagavan was recounting his past, okay, that's only us creating or attending to a false thing that never really happened.
Bhagavan often used the analogy of the lion that appears in an elephant's dream.
Right.
There is a belief that elephants are so afraid of lions, but if a lion appears in the dream of the elephant, the shock of seeing the lion will cause the elephant to wake up. So the lion that appears in the elephant's dream is unreal, but the waking is real. Likewise, the name and form of Guru is unreal. But because Guru turns our attention back towards ourselves, he brings about the real awakening. So Bhagavan, it is the name and form of Bhagavan is the lion that has appeared in our dream.
And that's the grace emanating from the oneself to the ego.
Exactly. Because Bhagavan is our own real nature, he alone is what actually exists. So in his view, there is nothing other than himself. So he doesn't see us as separate from himself. So he loves us, literally loves us as himself, because he sees us as himself. He doesn't see us as a person. He doesn't see us as an ego. He sees us as himself. Because of that infinite love that he has for us as himself, that love is what manifests as grace. And that grace is what has taken the name and form of Bhagavan Ramana to give us this teaching.
Right. So
Bhagavan is the very embodiment of love, the very embodiment of supreme love.
So here's where I'm getting stuck. When you say he experiences us as himself, does he experiences us as egos, or he doesn't see that, but it enters into our minds out of grace?
He sees us only as himself.
Okay.
When I say he sees us as himself, he doesn't see us as egos. He doesn't see us as people. He doesn't see us as anything other than I am. So he sees us as we actually are. We see ourselves wrongly. His vision is clear. Our vision is clouded. Because of this fundamental mistake we made of being aware of, instead of being aware of ourselves as just I am, we're aware of ourselves as I am this.
What is it that allows Bhagavan to enter the dream we're in and be a lion? Is it just the natural action of Sat-Chit?
Sat-Chit never acts. Sat-Chit is Sat is being. Sat is not doing. Okay. So that's why Bhagavan says. That's why Bhagavan says in the 15th paragraph of Nāṉ Ār, he gives the analogy of the sun. Just like the sun rises without icha, liking, sankalpa, desire, or yatna, effort. But everything that's happening on earth is happening because of the mere presence of the sun. And just like in the mere presence of a magnet, iron filings are moved, or the needle of a magnet or the compass is moved. It's by the mere that he says sun Esan Sanadi Visesha Matrata, by the mere special nature of the presence of him, of God. What is his presence is his being, and his being is itself love. Love is his very being. So grace is his very nature. So everything that happens by grace isn't doing anything. Grace, it just remains as it is. But everything happens as it's meant to happen.
Yeah, I can't verbalize it, but I get what you're saying.
I'm talking about what I don't understand, because I'm trying to put into words what cannot be grasped by the mind.
Exactly.
We cannot grasp it, but the words just give us an inkling. They're a pointer towards what it. But we cannot pretend that we've understood it just because we've understood the ideas. The ideas are. No idea can capture Bhagavan. That's why Bhagavan says in the very first Mangalam verse, the very first benedictory verse of Uludunapadu, since that existing substance, that ulapodal, that is Bhagavan, since it exists in the heart, devoid of thought, who can and how to think of that which is called the heart? To think of it is just to be it as it is, to be in the heart as it is. So we cannot know Bhagavan except by being Bhagavan. So whatever ideas we have, that is, now when we are talking or when we are thinking about these things, this is all at a conceptual level. It's good to have a clear conceptual understanding, because a clear conceptual understanding helps to point us in the right direction, to turn our attention back within. But we shouldn't pretend that because we've understood it conceptually, but we've understood Bhagavan, but we've understood Brahman, we've understood what we are. We haven't understood what we are. We still are aware of ourselves as I am this body, so we haven't understood anything, really. It's only at a certain level we've understood it. But that certain conceptual level is necessary, because if we didn't have that conceptual understanding, we wouldn't know where to go, where to attend. So we need to understand Bhagavan's teachings clearly at a conceptual level. But the real understanding comes to the extent to which we put it into practice. Because the more we put it into practice, the more the real clarity will shine forth from within.
I have no words, but I
well, it's better not to have words, because all our words are not capturing it. We can never capture the greatness of Bhagavan in words. We can never capture the greatness of Bhagavan in thought.
There's just like an intuitive.
We get an inkling. We get an inkling.
Yeah, and it just feels. I can't say it. I don't know.
Yeah, we have no doubt that when we hear Bhagavan's teachings, we have no doubt. Yes, this is correct. It's so clear to us.
Yeah. It's like a map. If you want to go to Arunachala, you need to have a map, but having a map is not being in Arunachala.
Exactly. But it points us in the right direction. That is Bhagavan's teachings.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank Bhagavan.
All thanks to Bhagavan, yes. Okay, right.
But Michael, it's past 5, but we have about 8 questions.
I've been talking too long today.
No, it's not that. No, it's just that sometimes there are more questions, sometimes there are fewer. So I think if we're going to do all the questions, then I guess we have to go very quickly.
Okay, I'll try.
Otherwise, you'll be here for another 2 hours.
Yes. I'll try to be brief. I'm not very good at that.
We'll try. And I'll also have a look to see if they can be combined, some of them. So the first one is, can you say something of the difference between awareness in deep sleep and the awareness, pure consciousness of self-realization?
All differences appear only in the mind. Since there is no mind in deep sleep, there is no difference. However, there seems to be a difference from the perspective of our mind in the waking and dream state. So to us, what do we now recollect about sleep? We know I slept, so we're aware of our existence. And we're also aware that we were aware that we existed. So but we are aware that we are not aware what we are. Likewise, now we are aware that we were in sleep. We were not aware what we were in sleep, because the same self-ignorance that is obstructing our view of what we actually are now is obstructing our view of what we actually were in sleep. So we cannot know what we experienced in sleep until we annihilate the ego here and now in the waking state. But actually, Bhagavan has made this clear. This is something that has never been stated so clearly before as Bhagavan did. Bhagavan said, sleep is a state of pure awareness. There is nothing other than pure awareness in sleep. Why? Because there's no ego in sleep. Since there's no ego, as he says in verse 26 of Ullajunapadu, or in the first two sentences of this last paragraph of Nāṉ Ār that we talked about today, if oneself comes into existence, everything comes into existence. If oneself subsides, everything subsides. So in sleep, we have subsided. Ego has completely dissolved into its source in sleep. So in sleep, all that remains is pure awareness. Because how can anything else exist in the absence of ego? And that is, some people have a doubt about it. They say, "Oh no! It is said in the scriptures that the vasanas remain in seed form." Who vasanas are inclinations? Whose inclinations are they? Ego's inclination. How can vasanas remain when ego isn't there? And then people say, "Oh, well, ego must be there in a seed form or in a latent form or something." Bhagavan is very, very explicit about it. In verse 21 of Ullajunapadu, he says, of verse 21 of Upadeshundya, he says referring to what he was talking about in the previous sentence, which is that infinite whole that appears as I am I. This is always the true import of the word I, because of the absence of our non-existence in sleep, which is devoid of I. Nanatra tukatam. Sleep which is devoid of I. Devoid of I means devoid of ego. And likewise, in the first sentence of Nāṉ Ār, he says, manamatra nidrayal, in sleep which is devoid of mind. So there's no ego. According to Bhagavan, there's no ego or mind in sleep. So there is nothing. All that exists in sleep is only what we actually are, which is pure awareness. The reason sleep seems to be a dark state, it seems to, when we wake up, I can't remember anything about sleep. I wasn't aware of anything we say. Yes, we weren't aware of any phenomena, but we were aware of our own existence. But what exactly was that awareness of our own existence, that pure awareness that we experienced in sleep? We cannot now recollect, because we are now we've now risen as ego. As ego, we can never know pure awareness. What experiences the pure awareness in sleep is only pure awareness. When we rise as ego, we have seemingly, not really, but seemingly separated ourselves from that pure awareness that we actually are. So we cannot, that is why often sleep is described as a state of darkness, a state of ignorance, and so on. But that's only from the perspective of ourself as ego in the waking and dream state. Actually, what is our actual experience in sleep is just pure awareness, I am. So it's a very, very subtle point. Bhagavan insisted sleep is a state of pure awareness. Sleep cannot be anything different to Turiya, because differences appear only in the view of mind. Since there's no mind in sleep, there cannot be any differences. But what makes, from our perspective, sleep seems to be different to Turiya, to our real state, because Turiya is eternal, but sleep seems to come and go. But in whose view does sleep seem to come and go? It's only from the view of the ego in the waking and dream state that sleep seems to come and go. Sleep is actually our eternal state. Sleep never comes to an end. It's only from the perspective of ego in waking and dream that sleep seems to have a beginning and to an end. I fell asleep and then I woke up. That I that fell asleep and that woke up is ego. What we actually are remains in sleep forever, eternal. The sleep of pure awareness.
The next question, Michael, is in Sat Chit Anand, how did Vasanas arise in the first place, thereby giving rise to ego?
Vasanas have not given rise to ego. Vasanas are ego's inclinations. How can ego's inclination give rise to vasanas? Vasanas arise only when we rise as ego. As Bhagavan says, when ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. So the vasanas are included in that everything. The vasanas are the seeds that give rise to everything else, but they are themselves part of that everything. So there are no vasanas without ego. So how did ego come into existence? Bhagavan says, before looking for an answer to that question, first see whether ego has ever come into existence. If we investigate ego, we will see that we are ever pure awareness and have never risen as ego. Therefore, the question doesn't arise. But if we rise as ego, the nature of ego is to always grasp things other than itself. Grasping form, it comes into existence. Grasping form, it stands. Grasping form, it flourishes. Leaving form, it grasps form. So form grasping is the very nature of ego. So the vasanas of ego's inclinations to grasp those forms. So it's the very vasanas are not ego, but it's the very nature of ego to have vasanas. But obviously there cannot be vasanas in the absence of ego. That is why, though it is said for purposes of explanation, to make it easy for people, it is said the vasanas remain in sleep and so they make the ego wake up in the next morning. That is only for explanation. That is not the truth, actually. The truth is, in sleep there is no I, no mind, no ego. Therefore, there are no vasanas.
The next question is, how exactly should we do Atma-vichara? Is it good to do it at a particular time every day for beginners? Or should we try to do it as part of our everyday activities, like working or having food? Did Bhagavan make any suggestion on this?
Bhagavan made a suggestion. Yes, there is a particular time you should practice Atma-vichara. That is here and now. At every moment we should practice it. That should be our aim. In practice, it's not so because we're still so interested in attending to other things, but we should be moving towards attending to ourselves more and more and more. The more we attend to ourselves, the more we will find the self-attentiveness will go on, at least in the background, even in the midst of other activities. So the deeper we go in this practice, the more we will find that we are never actually away from self-investigation. Sometimes the self-attentiveness is more intense. Sometimes it's less intense, but we always should be trying to be self-attentive at all times. Don't be disheartened if you're not, because we all fail. But that is what we should be trying towards. Every moment we are self-attentive, we are moving in the right direction. So even if you feel, oh, throughout the day I'm attending to so many other things, I do only a tiny, tiny bit of self-attentiveness. Doesn't matter. At least do that tiny bit and try and do a tiny bit, tomorrow a tiny bit more, tomorrow, the next day a tiny bit more. We should always be trying to be more and more self-attentive. That's all we can do. We can only try. Bhagavan never said you should succeed. He said you should try. Well, he didn't even say you should try. He indicated to us, but the wise thing to do is to try.
The next question is that are practices like Hatha Yoga and mindfulness, Vipassana, useful for self-realization?
Mindfulness, the Buddhist practice of Vipassana, what does mindfulness mean? Mindfulness means attentiveness. But what are we to attend to? They generally in a Vipassana meditation, they are attending to the breathing, to sensations within the body. They scan the body from head to toe and see what subtle sensations there are. And when they're active, they try and be mindful for everything they do. This is all being attentive to things other than ourselves. This body is not ourself, this mind is not ourself, this prana is not ourself, the activities are not ourself. So this is all cultivating a practice of attentiveness, but on something other than ourselves. Bhagavan says, yes, you need to be attentive, but don't attend to anything other than yourself. So we need to be self-mindful. We need to attend only to ourselves. This is Bhagavan's practice. So all these other practices, I don't know about Hatha Yoga. Hatha Yoga is the crudest form of practice, but all these different, as a discipline, it may be beneficial to some extent, but all these different practices have different degree of efficacy. In the most you can achieve from other practices is purification of the mind. But we cannot purify the mind fully by any other practice. We can only purify the mind to a certain extent. When the mind is sufficiently pure, we will lose interest in all other practices. The only practice that will appeal to us is this practice of self-investigation, because this is the direct path. Ultimately, this is the only means by which we can free ourselves. Because what is the problem? The problem is we've risen as ego. We've risen as ego by attending to things other than ourselves. So continuing to practice attending to this or to that, to a name and form of God, or to chakras in the body, or to prana, or to anything else, it may be helping to a certain extent, but it's rather treating the symptoms than dealing with the root cause. What is the root cause is our rising as ego. We rise as ego by grasping other things. So stop grasping anything else, grasp yourself. That is the solution. So the more we understand Bhagavan's teaching, the more we are drawn to the path of self-investigation, the less we will have any interest in other practices. We are not saying other practices are wrong. That is, they may be beneficial for people at a certain stage of spiritual development. We may have been through all these practices ourselves in the past, but all these become unnecessary once we are drawn to this path of self-investigation, because this is the ultimate path. This is the direct path. So nothing else is necessary. If we attend to ourselves, that alone is sufficient.
Yeah, it just occurred to me that in mindfulness and so on, because it is all about attention, it's in a way, it's making us aware that we are attending, and to stop that kind of unconscious grasping attention, by just attending and so on, is letting go of attention and sort of letting it dissolve. I think that's, and it's dissolving into something unnameable. I mean, I think, it's becoming more and more sort of inward. I think that's the kind of idea.
Yeah, all these practices, why people have been doing these sort of practices for hundreds or thousands of years, because there is some efficacy in them. But that efficacy, it pales into insignificance in comparison with the great efficacy of this very, very simple practice of self-attentiveness.
The next question is, what is the distinction between a sacred scripture and any modern-day spiritual text? What qualifies something as sacred and holy? And also, could you elaborate on Bhagavan's view of surrender? I understand there are two distinct practices: self-abidance and completely surrendering all responsibility for one's life to God or the self.
Texts are sacred to the extent to which they are pointing us our attention back at ourselves. So, for example, Bhagavan's texts are sacred because his entire focus of his teachings is attend to yourself, attend to yourself. All his teachings are pointing our attention back at ourselves. So for us, Bhagavan's teachings are the most sacred. Ultimately, what is sacred or what is not sacred is according to for some people, the Bible is the most sacred. For other people, Quran is the most sacred. So, but that is what you consider a sacred. That is one thing. But what is actually the greatest benefit is to be achieved by turning our attention towards ourselves. So those texts that turn our attention towards ourselves, but are constantly reminding us and encouraging us of the need to attend to ourselves, those are the most beneficial texts. So whether those texts were written in the 20th century AD or the 20th century BC doesn't matter. How ancient they are, that is Bhagavan's text, Uladu Napadu, Upadesha Undya, Nāṉ Ār. These are less than 100 years old. But that doesn't make them any less sacred than the Vedas that were composed, that came into existence several thousand years ago. So being modern or ancient doesn't determine whether it's something is sacred or not. To what extent is it directing our attention back to ourselves? That is ultimately what matters. Regarding other modern books, there are so many people who write, who had people, there's so many different levels of understanding. And most people, when they write books, what they write in the book is reflecting their level of understanding. So the value of books, it depends upon the extent to which that book is pointing our attention back at ourselves. So the most valuable texts for us who are following this path are Bhagavan's own writings. Let us not worry about any other texts. Bhagavan's texts are more than sufficient for us. And the other question about the surrender. No, self-abidance and self-surrender are exactly the same. They are not two different practices. Bhagavan says in the first sentence of the 13th paragraph of Nāṉ Ār, being Atmanishta Paran, that means being one who is established as oneself, being one who is abiding in oneself, is giving oneself to God. So self-abidance is itself self-surrender. But he says more in that sentence. He clarifies how to be one who is firmly established as oneself, how to abide as oneself. He says, Anma chintane tavira, vera chintane kalamba vadaku, satram idam kadamal. Not giving even the slightest room to the rising of any thought other than Atma-chintana. Atma-chintana literally means thought of oneself. It means self-attentiveness. So to the extent to which we are self-attentive, we are thereby not giving room for other thoughts to arise. And we are thereby remaining established as ourselves, and thereby giving ourselves to God. So self-investigation and self-surrender or self-abidance, these are all just different ways of describing one and the same practice. Turning our attention within and thereby being as we actually are, that is giving ourselves to God. So that is surrender as taught by Bhagavan.
Thank you very much for that, Michael. I did want to continue, probably meditate upon that a bit more. I will meditate upon that a bit more. I probably wanted to say a few more things, but I'm conscious of other people wanting to ask questions, and also I've got to go. But that's been very helpful, and I'll get back to you in the next session.
Okay, right.
Thank you very much.
Right.
Well, the next question, it's two questions, and I think it's still 4 questions to go, so we kind of have to rush through. So the first question is, it seems I really cannot stay self-attentive when I'm interacting with people. I lose self-attentiveness very easily there. Maybe it's due to people-pleasing tendencies or emotional and relational problems I have. What suggestions would Bhagavan give on how to maintain self-attentiveness in the midst of social action, of social interactions? And the second question is, when you, Michael, give pointers about the practice, you often say that we need to hold on to our fundamental awareness of our own existence. Is it also correct to say that we need to attend to awareness or attend to existence, or maybe attend to the fact of being aware or attend to the simple fact of being? Should we stay constantly aware of awareness, or should we stay constantly aware of the fact that we are? Are all these correct pointers towards ourselves?
Yes, that is. Bhagavan has given us many pointers, but some pointers are more precisely targeted than others. This thing of being aware of awareness is there ever a moment that we are not aware of being aware? We are always aware of being aware. We tend to overlook it. But more precise when saying being aware of awareness, we need to be aware of the one who is aware. Who am I? That is, we need to direct our attention back towards ourselves. Because when we use the word awareness, the meaning of the word awareness can vary according to the context. When Bhagavan uses the word awareness, he's referring to ourselves, with that which is aware, we who are aware. In that's one sense of the word awareness. But you can also, you can be aware that there's a pandemic going on in the world. That is awareness. Do you have awareness of the pandemic? Yes, I've got awareness of the pandemic. It's in the news every day, and we hear people who've got seriously ill and everything. So we're aware of it. But that awareness is just a knowledge about something. So we need to be very clear. What we are to attend to is the one who is aware. Who am I? Who is this one who is aware of all this? Who is it who is aware of this, who has this awareness of the pandemic and about the news in the world and about Russia about to invade, possibly going to be invading Ukraine? All these things, they're there in the news, we're aware of them. But being aware of things other than ourselves is something anya, something, this awareness. 2 years ago, none of us were aware of this pandemic. Now we're all aware of this pandemic. So the awareness of the pandemic has come in within the last 2 years. So it's not permanent. What is permanent is the fundamental awareness of our own existence. I am. That is what we need to attend to. That was part of the question. The other thing was, there was something just a little earlier than that in the question. I can't remember exactly what it was.
Sorry, Michael. The first part of the question was, it seems I really cannot stay self-attentive when I'm interacting with people.
Okay.
And I lose self-attentiveness there, maybe due to people-pleasing tendencies or emotional relation problems. And what suggestions would Bhagavan have to maintain self-attentiveness? And
don't worry about that. Try to be self-attentive as much as possible whenever you can be self-attentive. The more you are self-attentive, the more you will find that you're able to be self-attentive even in the midst of other activities. So let's be realistic in what we're trying to do. If our mind is so strongly outward going that we lose hold of self-attentiveness when we're in the company of other people, let's not worry about it. Let us try to be as self-attentive. Let us try to be self-attentive. Whenever we notice our attention has gone away, let us try to bring it back to ourselves. That's all that's required. We need to just try our best to be self-attentive as much as we can be. Slowly, we will thereby wean its mind off its interest and its concern about other things. And then the less we are concerned about other things, the less we have. This is what Bhagavan refers to as vairagya. In the 11th paragraph of Nāṉ Ār, he defines vairagya as not attending to other things. And so to the extent that we lose interest in attending to other things, we will not be affected by whatever is happening. So even if we're in the midst of company, even if people are talking worldly things, gossiping or whatever, it will not affect us because we're no longer so interested in this. So slowly, we've got to withdraw our interest from all other things and by focusing it more and more on ourselves. Who am I? That should be our passionate interest in life. If we are passionately interested to know who am I, even in the midst of company, we will continue, the self-attentiveness will continue. So supposing a friend of yours has got COVID and is in ICU and is in a very critical condition. Even when you're in the midst of company of other friends, you'll keep on thinking about your friend. Are they going to be okay? Are they going to survive? Because of your concern for that friend, your mind is often on that friend. So even in the midst of company, people will say things that will make you remind you of your friend. Your mind will keep on going back there. If you have as much passion, as much passionate interest to know who am I as you have about the welfare of your friend, you will find you can hold on to self-attentiveness even in the midst of in the company of other people, in the midst of any amount of activity. It's all a matter of interest. We've got to slowly shift our interest away from other things towards this. Our aim should be to make our sole interest in life to know who am I.
You say that actions bear fruit in future lifetimes. I have a small question. Does the term actions include thoughts as well? For example, if I have the desire to eat chocolate and I contemplate eating chocolate and how tasty it is, but I do not get to eat chocolate, so I do not act on that thought, would this still generate fresh karma even though I did not or could not eat the chocolate?
Yes. Action means action of mind, speech, or body. As I said, where does agamya, the action done according to our will, where does it start? Whenever we allow our attention to move away from ourselves towards anything else, that is an agamya. It is under the sway of our vishaya vasanas that our attention goes towards anything else. So thinking about anything, attending to anything, is an agamya karma. So if we want to avoid doing agamya, we need to try more and more to hold on to self-attentiveness. To the extent to which we hold on to self-attentiveness, we are thereby not allowing our attention to be swayed by our vishaya vasanas, and therefore we are not engaging in agamya. And therefore, whatever action, if we are holding on to self-attentiveness so firmly that we don't allow our attention to move away from ourselves, whatever actions are done by mind, speech, and body will be actions that God has made us do. Those actions will do whether we attend to ourselves or we attend to other things. Because when I say we will do, our mind, speech, and body will do. But if we allow our attention the slightest bit away from ourselves, we are beginning to do agamya. It doesn't mean all agamya is equal. For example, the thought of eating chocolate may come to my mind, and I may divert my attention back towards myself. But for a moment, my mind went towards that thought. Obviously, the fruit of such a slight movement of my attention away from myself is far less than the fruit of if I think, oh, I want chocolate. How can I get chocolate? I don't have any money to buy chocolate. How can I go and earn money and buy chocolate? I really want chocolate. Or shall I go and beg or steal or borrow to get chocolate? I must have chocolate. If you obsess about the idea of chocolate and you somehow or other get money and you go to a shop and you buy chocolate and you gobble the chocolate up, and then obviously that has more fruit than the momentary allowing your attention away from yourself to think of chocolate. So, but what is the appropriate fruit for each action? That is all determined by God. So we need not be concerned about that. Our concern should be not allowing our attention to move away from ourselves. Avoid holding on to self-attentiveness. That should be our aim. If we hold on to self-attentiveness, we need not worry at all about any karma. We need not worry about anything at all. All we need to be concerned about is holding on to I more and more. What Bhagavan taught us about the law of karma is not to make us dwell more and more upon this karma. He's to make us understand we need not be concerned about karma. Prarabdha is the actions what we are to experience is all determined by prarabdha. So we need not be concerned about anything that we are to experience. Whatever actions we need to do in accordance with prarabdha, for our prarabdha to unfold, we will be made to do. So we need not worry about those actions. All other actions are actions we do under the sway of our vasanas. So we need not worry about those actions. What we need to be concerned about is not to allow ourselves to be swayed by vasanas. We can avoid being swayed by vasanas only by clinging to self-attentiveness. So all that Bhagavan taught us about karma, the law of karma, is to point us back to the need for us to attend to ourselves. If we're attending to ourselves, we need not be concerned about anything else.
I think the next question has been answered, but I'll just say it. Would it be correct to say that all outcomes are according to prarabdha, that is predetermined, but our actions may or may not be predetermined?
Yes, very simple. we are free to, that is, what is destined to happen is going to happen. What is not destined to happen is not going to happen. So we are not free to change anything that is destined to happen. But we are free to want to change it and to try to change it. But whatever be the outcome, that is prarabdha.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Michael. That's good. Yeah.
The last question is, further to your explanation of grace, why is it that only some people receive the grace of accepting Bhagavan as Guru?
Bhagavan has said, God is ever gracious. God is always shining in our heart as eye. God is our nearest and dearest. So his grace is never lacking. But it is up to us to avail ourselves of that grace. He is always shining in our heart as eye. If we are always allowing our attention to go outwards, he's making his grace available to us. We are neglecting it. We can't blame him. Ramakrishna Paramahamsa had a very nice homely way of putting things. So in his own homely style, he said, the grace of three people are necessary: grace of God, grace of Guru, and grace of Jiva. Grace of God and grace of Guru is always abundantly available. What is lacking is the grace of Jiva. So that is, God is always making his grace available to us. It's up to us whether we avail ourselves of that grace or not. So the grace is equally, I think in the Bible somewhere it said, God makes the rain shower on the good, on the just and the unjust alike, the good and the bad alike. So God's grace is available for all of us. Another nice analogy Ramakrishna Paramahamsa gave. He said, the grace is always showering down, but when it's raining, heavy monsoon rain, if you've got a mound, the rain all runs off it. If you've got a depression, the rainwater gathers there. So if we are proud, the grace will run off us. Though it's ever showering upon us, it'll run off us like off a duck's back because we are proud and like a big mountain. But how more and more we subside, as Bhagavan says in this last paragraph of Nāṉ Ār, to whatever extent we sinking low, we conduct ourselves, to that extent it is good. Because the more we sink low, the more the grace will accumulate. Like in a depression in the ground, how the water will accumulate there, the grace will accumulate in our heart to the extent to which we are humble. To the extent to which we rise up with pride, as I am a great spiritual aspirant. I have got the grace of God. So long as we rise with that pride, we are forcing all the grace which should be accumulating in our heart, we are squeezing it out because we are occupying our whole heart with our big fat ego. I am a great devotee. I am blessed by God. I have the special blessings of God. If you want to benefit from God's grace, you need to subside more and more and more. And that is what Bhagavan's teachings are all about. Subsiding, subsiding, subsiding.
Did Bhagavan ever actually talk about Christmas, or Michael, or Did any Christian devotee question him?
I don't know. But I know Bhagavan said about Easter, but the crucifixion is the tattva of the crucifixion is the crucifixion of the Dehatma Buddhi, the false awareness I am this body, and the Easter, the resurrection, is when this Dehatma Buddhi subsides, when the false awareness I am this body subsides, what then shines forth as I am I, that is the resurrection. So Bhagavan explained the tattva of Good Friday and Easter. I don't know if he said anything in particular about Christmas. I'm not, but I'm aware of.
Right.
And he said about the Christian Trinity. God the Father is Ishvara, God the Son is Guru, and God the Holy Spirit is Atma. God, Guru, and Self are one and the same. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Arunachala Ramanaya.